welcome back to this week's episode of AMA Friday with Amy Miller, Recruiting in Yoga Pants. Okay, so this is going to be part one of a two-part video series about recruiters and their compensation. Okay, so as I was putting this video together, I realized that this was a bigger topic than a 10-minute video. So I decided to go ahead and break it into two parts. Thank you for if you voted on the poll on LinkedIn. Appreciate you. You helped drive this decision. But the idea here is I wanted to start, first of all, by kind of digging into the different kinds of recruiters that you may run into as a job seeker. I will sometimes like read people's feedback or things that they say about recruiting. I'm like, well, they're not talking about me. I would never. But I think there is this unfortunate kind of mindset that like all recruiters are exactly the same and we all function in the same way, and we just don't. And I'm not saying that to like point a finger and say, oh, well, that kind is bad and my kind is best. It's not about that. I think all recruiters have the capability and the potential of being amazing and being very helpful to you in your job search. But we also have our limitations, okay? So we're gonna ground ourselves in some of the differences and some of the things that you can expect from a recruiter, depending on which category that they're in. And then next week, we're gonna dig into how they're compensated, what that looks like, and really kind of unpack the emotional currency, if you will, that a recruiter has, and how you as a job seeker can tap into that to get where you want to go. Okay? We can be useful tools sometimes. All right? We'll just say that. That's it. All right. So I've broken down here basically the three kinds of recruiters you're likely to run into. This is not meant to be an exhaustive list. Okay? I guarantee there's some jackass out there watching and I'm not one of those. I'm something completely different. Yes, you special unicorn, you. I'm sure you don't fit into one of these categories. But for today's purposes, this is what we're going to talk about. Okay? My friends in agency. Now, a lot of you know this already. I personally grew up in agency recruiting, okay? I stumbled into it as a young 20-something, didn't know any better, was promised I'd make a lot of money. They handed me a stack of resumes, told me to start picking up the phone, start calling people. No idea what I was doing. But I learned a lot, and I did eventually make a lot of money. It took a while though. So we have our agency recruiters. We'll talk a little bit more about that. Then we have our corporate recruiters, which is an internal, what I do now. So I'm very well versed in this. And then we have kind of the love child of these two, which is an RPO recruiter, or a recruitment process outsourcing, I think is what that stands for. So I'll talk a little bit about that. I've not personally worked in an RPO, but I know a lot of people who have and say great things about it. So I'll share what I do know, which isn't a lot, but I'll try to explain what that means too. Agency. Why should I work with an agency recruiter? There's a couple of reasons. Okay, first of all, the pros of working with an agency. They are going to have relationships and contracts and opportunities with a variety of companies. So the biggest pro is going to be, honestly, it's going to be variety, right? A lot of agency recruiters they might be kind of divided by like specialty. It could be by industry. It could be geographic. I've worked for agencies that basically owned all of a town. Right? Like they were the agency as where you went to get a job if you lived in Bakersfield or something. So definitely have worked with agencies that kind of have a geographic footprint. Some that are, focused on a very specific industry, or they have this niche in like manufacturing or something. So there is some nuances into kind of how they're set up. You might have somebody focusing on accounting or what have you. But the good thing is that they're going to have a lot of opportunity. They're going to work with a bunch of different companies. So if I'm engaged with a particular agency, I could potentially be a fit for a bunch of their clients. And so I'm kind of spreading the opportunity for getting interviews and getting potential offers by being able to work with one recruiter on a number of different roles at different companies. So Now, the key is you have to be qualified for those roles in those companies. But the idea is an agency recruiter is going to have opportunities at their fingertips more broadly than a corporate recruiter would. The downside is you only really get visibility into companies that an agency recruiter or an agency is working with. So there is a contract in place. This is important, y'all, okay? And this is, again, it's not so much of a downside, but something to be mindful of is, once again, recruiters do not get jobs for people. However, a lot of job seekers have this belief that especially an agency recruiter is going to go find them a job. And frankly, a lot of agency recruiters sell this bullshit too, okay? They're doing business development, okay? I've made thousands of MPC calls in my lifetime, most placeable candidate. This is where I'll get a great candidate on the hook. You know, maybe you applied to something, maybe I cold called you, however, we're engaged now, we're talking, I think you're great. I'm going to potentially leverage your resume and your background to try to get into new companies that I'm not currently working with. That, my friends, is business development. That is not finding you a job, okay? There's nothing wrong with this. Like I said, I've done it 1,000 times. I just want you as a job seeker to know what's happening, okay? You have the right to know where your information is going, if it is being used in this way. I'm just saying, go ahead, get your pitchforks. I don't give a shit. But this is how it works in an agency. If it doesn't work like that anymore, then tell me, how are you doing business development? Because I know better. So as a job seeker, again, just want you to be aware. It's not a bad thing. But the good thing is that you are going to have this variety of opportunities. I may be, as an agency recruiter, working with a bunch of companies. The other thing is I'm sometimes able to be a lot more open with feedback. We're going to talk about this. Corporate recruiter usually can't give feedback. An agency recruiter usually doesn't have those boundaries. Like, they can full on be like, you know what? They didn't like you because you had red hair. Not everybody likes ginger, okay? I mean, I don't think anybody would say that. But you get what I'm saying? Like, there's usually not the restriction around feedback that you find in a corporate environment. Speaking of corporate, what are the pros of working directly with a corporate recruiter? So that's what I do. I am currently a corporate recruiter for a very large company. However, I am aligned to a very specific team, okay? So the pro is that I am very close to my business, okay? I am in their weekly staff meetings. I am involved in strategy discussions. I'm helping them figure out, okay, you have X headcount and we have Y problems and this is how we're going to solve for it. So I get to be really upfront and personal with these discussions. Sometimes that is just by virtue of, you know, the position I'm in. I'm a client lead recruiter, so I get to have those, you know, kind of higher level discussions. But for the most part, corporate recruiters are closely aligned to their hiring partners, and we know a lot of what's going on behind the scenes, how the sausage is made. The downside, we don't always get to share all of that externally, okay? We talked about feedback earlier. Corporate recruiters generally can't give feedback, so that's a downside. But we do generally have really good insight and knowledge into the workings of a business, the love language of our hiring managers, and how to navigate that process. We really kind of get to own that like start to finish, right? The downside is we are limited to the company that we're employed by, right? Like, I couldn't help you get a job at Google. I could not present you to a manager at Microsoft. Like, that is no longer my job. I no longer have those connections. And my responsibility is first and foremost to my employer, which is my corporation that signs my paycheck. We will talk about my compensation next week and how I get paid. Okay, so that's the corporate side. Then you have the RPO model. This is again, I said earlier, only half kidding, it's kind of the love child of these two. When an agency recruiter and a corporate recruiter love each other very much, they can sometimes birth an RPO. So an RPO is when a company has a significant recruiting lift that needs to happen. They don't necessarily have the infrastructure or the resources or the willingness to invest in a full-time team and a corporate recruiting team, but they do need people on site or people dedicated, even virtually. When I say on-site, I mean dedicated to the company, to perform recruiting for that organization. So they are tied to an org. They are, usually assigned. You'll have a group of recruiters that are assigned to a particular business group or a particular company. And they are basically kind of functioning as a corporate recruiter in that regard. But they're paid through an agency. They're part of, this larger external team, and that they may not be around for long, right? They may come in for like a 6-month assignment. They may, move on, quickly. It depends. I know some recruiters who've been with an RPO for years and years, and that's okay. So again, there's no real one size fits all here, but there are some nuances between the three. One of the biggest things about an RPO, just to keep in mind, is again, they are generally going to function more like a corporate recruiter and have that, kind of insight and be part of the larger team, those kinds of things. But they are also typically contractors, which means their expectations are a little different. They're coming in to do a function. They're coming in to solve a specific problem, do a specific job, and then they're moving on to the next RPO or the next recruiting gig or what have you. So it's a bit of a blend of these two with some similarities to both, but overall, you can expect them to function more like a corporate recruiter and have access to opportunities for the company that they're aligned to for that period of time. Okay, that was a long video already, so we're gonna break there. We will come back next week and talk about the compensation breakdown and how do we earn our fat paychecks in these various models. So hopefully that gave you a starting point and some good questions for next week. Email me anytime, amy@recruitinginyogapants.com. You can drop a comment down below, and we will see you for part 2 next week.